What if part of your protein supply could grow beside your house, across a balcony, or even inside a few large containers? Most people think homegrown protein means acres of farmland, complicated equipment, and months of work. But some of the world's most protein-rich plants are surprisingly easy to grow, and several produce food far more valuable than their tiny appearance suggests. Most of them have simply been forgotten, replaced by a handful of commercial staples, or never introduced outside the region where they originated. By the end of this video, you'll know 15 of them, where they came from, what they actually taste like, what modern nutrition science says about them, and exactly how to grow each one safely in your own yard. Number 8 on this list was one of Thomas Jefferson's favorite plants at Monticello, and almost nobody realizes it's technically a protein crop. And number 12 is a bean so tough it can survive on a single desert rainstorm. It kept entire communities fed through droughts that wiped out everything else around them. If you're into growing real food that most people overlook, subscribe and drop a comment telling me which of these you've actually heard of before. I have a feeling it won't be many. Let's get into it.
Winged bean, the plant that feeds you 4 different ways. This is arguably the most complete food plant on this entire list. The winged bean is a climbing tropical legume where nearly every part is edible: the young pods, the mature seeds, the flowers, the leaves, and the tuberous roots underground. It's native to tropical Southeast Asia and Papua New Guinea, and it's been a staple in parts of that region for generations, yet it's almost completely unknown in Western gardens. Winged bean needs warmth. It's a true tropical plant, so if you're outside a frost-free climate, grow it as a warm season annual after your last frost, or in a large container you can bring indoors. Give it a trellis or fence to climb. The vines can reach several meters. Plant seeds directly in well-draining soil in full sun, water consistently, and expect roughly 70 to 100 days before you're harvesting young pods. The tubers take longer, closer to the end of the growing season. Young pods are harvested before they toughen, and they taste similar to a cross between a green bean and asparagus, with a slightly nutty edge. The tubers taste faintly sweet, like a cross between a potato and a water chestnut. Research on winged bean seeds has found protein content in the range of 30 to 37% by dry weight, putting it in the same league as soybean. The tubers also carry a meaningful protein load compared to other root vegetables. Like many legumes, raw or undercooked winged bean seeds contain natural anti-nutrients that are neutralized by proper cooking, so the mature beans should always be cooked thoroughly, the same way you treat dried soybeans. If this one already feels unfamiliar, get ready. Most of this list is going to feel the same way.
Moringa, the tree that never stops giving. Where the winged bean is a vine, moringa is a tree, and one of the fastest growing trees you can put in the ground. Moringa oleifera is native to the foothills of the Himalayas in the Indian subcontinent, where it's been used in traditional Ayurvedic practice for centuries. Its common nickname, the miracle tree, comes from how much usable food it produces from so little care. The leaves, pods, flowers, and seeds are all edible, and the tree tolerates poor soil and drought once established. Moringa grows fastest from seed in warm, well-draining soil and full sun. In tropical or subtropical climates, it can be grown outdoors year-round. In cooler regions, it's typically grown in a large container and brought indoors for winter, or treated as an annual that regrows from the root each spring. It's fast. Many growers see several feet of growth in the first year alone. You can begin harvesting leaves once the tree is a few feet tall, usually within a couple of months. The leaves are harvested by hand stripping them from the stem, similar to picking herbs. They have a mild, slightly peppery spinach-like flavor and can be eaten raw in small amounts or cooked like any leafy green. The immature pods, sometimes called drumsticks, are cooked and eaten like a vegetable in South Asian cuisine. Moringa leaves are notably dense in plant protein for a leafy green, along with vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and potassium. Ongoing research has studied moringa's antioxidant compounds and their association with markers of inflammation, though much of this research is still in early or preliminary stages. Moringa is a promising nutritional plant, not a proven medical treatment, so it's worth enjoying it as a food rather than expecting therapeutic results.
Number 3, Lupin, the flower with a secret. You've probably seen lupin before and had no idea it was a protein crop. Those tall spikes of pea-like flowers that show up in cottage gardens and roadside plantings across the world. What most people don't realize is that lupin seeds in the right varieties contain more protein by weight than almost any other legume. commonly cited in the range of 32 to 42%, which rivals or exceeds soybean. Here's the important part. Not all lupin is food safe. Ornamental garden lupins and wild lupin varieties are naturally bitter, meaning they carry high concentrations of alkaloid compounds that can be toxic if eaten. If your goal is a beautiful flower bed, any lupin variety works wonderfully as an ornamental. Full sun, well-draining, slightly acidic soil, and lupins will reward you with dramatic blooms. Follow a trusted recipe if you plan to eat the seeds. But if your goal is food, you need to specifically buy seed labeled as a sweet lupin food variety, commonly Lupinus albus, angustifolius, or luteus food cultivars, from a seed supplier that sells it for that purpose. Don't assume a random ornamental lupin in your yard is edible, because it likely isn't. Follow a trusted recipe if you plan to eat the seeds. Beyond its high protein content, lupin is low in starch and rich in dietary fiber, and its nutrient profile has been studied for its association with healthier blood sugar responses when used in place of higher glycemic flours.
Edamame, the familiar face. After 3 unfamiliar plants, here's one you already know, just not as something you grow yourself. Edamame is simply soybean harvested young, while the beans are still green and tender, before they mature and dry. Soybean has been cultivated in East Asia for thousands of years and is one of the most extensively studied protein crops in the world. Edamame is one of the easier plants on this list for a beginner. Direct sow seeds in full sun after the soil has warmed in spring. Space them a few inches apart and keep the soil consistently moist. Like most legumes, soybean partners with soil bacteria to pull nitrogen from the air, which is part of why it improves the soil it grows in. It does beautifully in large containers or raised beds and matures in roughly 80 to 100 days depending on the variety. You harvest whole pods while they're still bright green and plump before the beans inside hardened. Steamed or boiled briefly and lightly salted, edamame has a mild, slightly sweet, nutty flavor, a completely different eating experience from dried soybeans. Edamame is a complete plant protein, meaning it contains all 9 essential amino acids, and it's rich in fiber, folate, and vitamin K. It's one of the most extensively researched legumes for its association with cardiovascular health markers, largely credited to its combination of plant protein, fiber, and unsaturated fat.
Number 5. Peanuts, the underground surprise. Most people don't actually know how peanuts grow, and the reveal is one of the strangest in the plant kingdom. Peanuts flower above ground like most plants, but after pollination, a structure called a peg grows downward from the base of the flower and literally pushes the developing pod underground, where it matures beneath the soil. This is called geocarpy, and peanuts are one of the few crops that do it. Native to South America, peanuts spread through trade routes for centuries before becoming a staple crop across the American South, West Africa, and parts of Asia. Peanuts need a long, warm growing season, full sun, loose, sandy, well-draining soil, and consistent moisture, especially once the pegs start burrowing. They do well in large containers, 5-gallon or bigger, as long as the soil is loose enough for the pegs to penetrate. Expect around 100 to 150 days from planting to harvest, depending on variety. You harvest by pulling the entire plant and letting the pods cure and dry for a couple of weeks before shelling. Freshly dug, unroasted peanuts have a milder, almost vegetal flavor compared to the roasted peanuts you're used to. Roasting develops the deeper, nutty flavor most people associate with them. Peanuts are roughly 25% protein by weight, along with a strong profile of healthy unsaturated fats, fiber, and niacin. Peanuts are one of the most common food allergens, so if you're growing them for a household, be aware of that before serving them to anyone with an unknown allergy status.
Number 6. Bambara Groundnut, peanuts' forgotten cousin. If peanuts surprised you, this next one will surprise you more, because it does almost the exact same underground trick, and almost nobody outside West Africa has heard of it. Bambara groundnut, Vignes subturnea, is a legume native to West Africa that also produces its pods underground, much like a peanut, but it's a completely different plant, and it's remarkably drought tolerant, often thriving in dry, marginal soils where other legumes fail. Give it what you'd give a peanut: full sun, warm temperatures, loose, well-draining soil, but expect it to be even more forgiving of dry spells and poor soil once it's established. It's a longer season crop, typically needing 90 to 170 days depending on variety and climate, so it suits gardeners in warm regions with a long frost-free window.
Pods are dug up much like peanuts, and the beans inside have a starchy, slightly nutty flavor, closer to a cross between a peanut and a dried bean. They're almost always cooked before eating, similar to how you'd prepare a dried bean. Bambara groundnut is considered a nutritionally complete legume, carrying a meaningful combination of protein, carbohydrates, and fiber. And it's been studied by agricultural researchers as a climate-resilient crop for regions facing increasing drought, one of several orphan crops scientists are revisiting as food security becomes a bigger global concern.
Number 7. Scarlet runner bean, the hummingbird magnet. This is where the list turns visually spectacular. Scarlet runner bean, Phaseolus coccineus, produces some of the most striking flowers of any edible plant, clusters of brilliant red-orange blooms that pollinators, especially hummingbirds, can't resist. It's native to the mountainous regions of Mexico and Central America, where it was cultivated by indigenous communities long before European contact, and in cooler climates, it can behave as a perennial, regrowing from a fleshy underground root year after year. Give it a trellis, fence, or tall support. This is a vigorous climber. Plant after your last frost in full sun, keep the soil consistently moist, and it will reward you with continuous flowering in pods through the growing season. Pods are typically ready in roughly 60 to 90 days, and in warmer zones, the root can survive winter and resprout the following spring. Young pods can be eaten like green beans, tender and slightly grassy. Left to mature, the beans inside are large, colorful, and starchy, closer in texture to a lima bean, and are always cooked before eating like any dried bean. Like most beans in the Phaseolus genus, scarlet runner beans are a strong source of plant protein and fiber, along with iron and folate. This is a plant that earns its place in a flower bed and a vegetable garden at the same time, which is rare.
8. Lablab Bean, Hyacinth Bean, Jefferson's favorite vine. Here's a plant with real American garden history behind it. Lablab bean, also called hyacinth bean, Lablab purpureus, is a fast-growing tropical vine with striking purple flowers and glossy purple pods. Records from Monticello show that Thomas Jefferson planted arbor beans, purple, scarlet, white, and crimson, along his garden terraces in 1812, and historians believe at least some of those were this exact plant, sold to him by his favorite nurseryman at the time. It's native to Africa, and it's been cultivated across Asia and North Africa for both its ornamental value and, in some regions, as food. Here's how to grow it. Give it a fence, arbor, or trellis. It's a vigorous climber that can reach dramatic heights in a single season. Direct sow after your last frost in full sun and well-draining soil, and it will reward you with color from midsummer into fall. Important safety note. The mature dried seeds of this plant contain natural cyanogenic compounds and require a very specific thorough double boiling process to make them safe to eat, a process best left to cooks who are trained in it. Many gardeners grow this one purely as a stunning ornamental and never eat the beans at all, and that's a completely valid way to grow it. Like other legumes in this family, properly processed Lablab beans are valued in the regions where they're traditionally eaten for their solid plant protein content. But given the preparation risk, this is one entry where the real reward is historical curiosity and garden beauty, rather than a dinner plate.
Number 9. Pigeon Pea, the shrub that keeps giving. Every plant so far has been an annual vine or a single-season crop. Pigeon pea breaks that pattern completely. Cajanus is a woody, shrub-like legume that can live and keep producing for several years in the right climate, rather than needing to be replanted annually. It's a dietary staple across India, where it's the base of dal, and across parts of Africa and the Caribbean. They grow in warm, frost-free climates. Pigeon pea can be planted once and harvested for multiple seasons as a small perennial shrub, often reaching 6 to 10 feet tall. In cooler climates, it's grown as a warm season annual instead, planted after the last frost in full sun. It's low maintenance once established, and like other legumes, fixes nitrogen in the soil around it. Pods are harvested either young and green, cooked much like edamame, or left to mature and dry, then cooked like a split pea or lentil. The flavor is earthy and slightly sweet, with the texture similar to a small lentil once dried. Pigeon pea is a strong source of plant protein and dietary fiber, and it's a dietary staple precisely because it delivers reliable nutrition in regions where it's grown season after season without replanting. If you only have room for one perennial protein plant in a warm climate, this is one of the most practical options on the entire list.
Number 10. Sesame, the seed you never thought to plant. You've eaten sesame thousands of times.
you've probably never once considered growing it. Sesame is one of the oldest cultivated oilseed crops in human history, domesticated thousands of years ago and used across Middle Eastern, African, and Asian cuisines ever since. What almost nobody realizes is that the plant itself is beautiful. Tall stalks with tubular flowers, followed by decorative seed capsules that look almost architectural. Sesame needs heat and a long, warm season, full sun, well-draining soil, and minimal water once established, since it's naturally drought-tolerant. Direct sow after your soil has fully warmed and expect roughly 90 to 120 days to maturity, when the pods dry and are ready to be shaken loose for their seeds. The seed capsules are cut and dried, then the tiny seeds are shaken or threshed out. Fresh, home-harvested sesame has the same nutty, toasty flavor you already know, and it can be used raw or toasted exactly like store-bought sesame. Sesame seeds are dense in plant protein, healthy unsaturated fats, and minerals including calcium, iron, and magnesium. They also contain lignans, plant compounds that have been studied for their antioxidant properties, though again, this research is best understood as promising rather than conclusive. Growing your own sesame turns an ingredient you've only ever bought in a jar into something you can watch flower in your own yard.
Number 11, Yardlong Bean, the foot-long surprise. This plant produces some of the most visually absurd pods in the vegetable world. Yardlong bean, Vigna ungulata subspecies sesquipedales, also called the asparagus bean, is technically a variety of cowpea, cultivated primarily across Southeast Asia and China. The pods routinely grow 1 to 3 feet long, hanging in dramatic clusters from a climbing vine. This plant loves heat, more than most beans, so it performs best in warm climates or a long, hot summer. Give it a sturdy trellis, plant in full sun after the soil has warmed, and keep it consistently watered. It's a fast, productive plant, often ready to harvest within 60 to 75 days, and it will keep producing new pods continuously if you harvest regularly. Harvest and taste. Pods are picked young and tender, well before the beans inside swell, and are cooked much like a green bean, commonly stir-fried, where they hold a pleasant snap and mild, slightly earthy flavor. Nutrition. As a cowpea relative, Yardlong bean carries a solid plant protein and fiber profile, along with vitamin C and folate, and shares the same nitrogen-fixing benefit for your soil that most legumes provide. If you want a single plant that makes your garden look unbelievable in photos, this is probably it.
Number 12, Tepary Bean, the bean that laughs at drought. This is one of the most resilient food crops in North America, and almost nobody outside the American Southwest has ever heard of it. Tepary bean, Phaseolus acutifolius, was domesticated in the Sonoran Desert region thousands of years ago and has been cultivated for generations by the Tohono O'odham and neighboring desert communities. It's considered one of the most heat and drought-tolerant legumes in the world, historically grown using nothing but seasonal monsoon rains, with some varieties able to germinate, flower, and produce a harvest from a single significant rainfall. Tepary bean prefers stress. It performs best in hot, dry conditions with well-draining soil, and interestingly, tends to underperform if it's overwatered or over-fertilized, unlike most garden vegetables. Plant after your last frost and full sun, water it to get it established, and then ease off. This is a plant built to thrive on far less than you'd give a typical bean. Pods are left to dry on the plant, then harvested and shelled like any dried bean. The beans have an earthy, slightly nutty flavor with a naturally quick cooking time compared to many other dried beans. Tepary beans are high in both protein and fiber, and they carry a naturally low glycemic profile. Agricultural researchers and indigenous food advocates have specifically highlighted traditional desert diets built around crops like tepary bean for their association with better metabolic health outcomes compared to modern processed diets. It is a great example of an ancestral crop that modern nutrition science is only now catching up to.
Number 13, Fava Bean, the ancient cool season powerhouse. Fava bean, also called broad bean, Vicia faba, is one of the oldest cultivated legumes on Earth, with a history stretching back thousands of years across the Mediterranean, Middle East, and North Africa. Unlike most of the plants on this list, it thrives in cool weather, making it a great crop for spring or fall rather than the height of summer. Fava bean actually prefers cooler temperatures and can tolerate light frost, so it's typically planted in early spring or, in mild winter climates, in fall for an early spring harvest.
It produces attractive black and white flowers before setting thick, potted pods. Give it full sun, moderately rich soil, and consistent moisture, and expect roughly 80 to 100 days to maturity. Young pods can be eaten whole when very small and tender, but they're most commonly harvested for the beans inside, which have a rich, slightly bitter, buttery flavor when fresh, mellowing significantly once cooked. Important safety note: fava beans are the specific trigger for a genetic condition called favism, an inherited enzyme deficiency, G6PD deficiency, that causes a serious reaction, including destruction of red blood cells in people who carry it. It's a well-documented, real medical condition, and anyone unsure of their G6PD status should check with a doctor before eating fava beans for the first time, especially before feeding them to children. For everyone else, fava beans are an excellent source of plant protein, fiber, and folate, and their high lysine content makes them a nutritionally valuable complement to grain-based diets.
Number 14, cowpea, best known in North America as the black-eyed pea, is a legume with African origins, cultivated for millennia, and eventually spread across the Americas, where it became a southern staple. It's one of the easiest, most forgiving legumes a beginner can grow. Cowpea tolerates heat, poor soil, and inconsistent watering far better than most vegetables, which is exactly why it's such a reliable beginner crop. Direct sow after your last frost in full sun, and it asks for very little beyond that. Most varieties mature in roughly 60 to 90 days, and like other legumes, it improves the soil it grows in. Pods are typically left to mature and dry on the plant, then shelled for their beans, which have the familiar, mild, earthy flavor of black-eyed peas, though they can also be harvested young and cooked fresh, similar to a shelling pea. Cowpea is a strong source of plant protein and fiber, along with folate, iron, and potassium, and it's been studied by agricultural researchers as an important crop for food security in hot, arid regions, specifically because it performs reliably where many other crops fail. If everything else on this list feels intimidating, start here. This is the plant that will make you feel like a successful protein farmer within one season.
Number 15, fenugreek, the double-duty finisher. The final plant on this list is one of the fastest and most beginner-friendly of them all. Fenugreek is an ancient crop with roots across the Mediterranean and West Asia, used for thousands of years for both its edible leaves and its aromatic seeds, especially throughout Indian cuisine, where the fresh leaves are known as methi. This is one of the easiest plants on this list to grow in a small container on a windowsill or balcony. Sow seeds directly in well-draining soil, keep it consistently moist, and give it as much sun as you can. Leaves can be harvested within just a few weeks for a fast, cut-and-come-again crop, while letting the plant go to seed for the aromatic fenugreek seeds themselves takes closer to 100 to 120 days. The young leaves have a slightly bitter, herby, almost maple-adjacent flavor, and are used much like a leafy herb in cooking. The dried seeds are famously aromatic and slightly bitter on their own, but mellow and become deeply savory when toasted or cooked into a dish. Fenugreek leaves and seeds both contribute plant protein and fiber to the diet, and the seeds in particular have been studied for their association with healthy blood sugar responses, largely attributed to their high soluble fiber content. Vines, shrubs, trees, and tiny container herbs, desert-adapted survivors, and cool season classics. Plants that have fed entire civilizations for thousands of years, sitting almost completely unknown in modern backyards. Here's the pattern worth remembering. Nearly all of these are legumes, or at least nitrogen-fixing plants, which means every one of them is quietly improving the soil it grows in while it feeds you. If you're brand new to growing your own protein, start with cowpeas or edamame, the two most forgiving plants on this list, both hard to mess up. If you want the aesthetic payoff, Scarlet runner bean or Lablab bean will transform a plain fence into something people stop to photograph. If you're gardening somewhere hot and dry, Tepary bean and Bambara groundnut are the two plants specifically built for your conditions. And if you only have a windowsill, fenugreek proves you don't need a yard at all. A few of these plants, Lupin, Fava Bean, and the mature seeds of Lablab Bean in particular, require real care, either in choosing the right variety, knowing your own health background, or following a proper preparation process. The bigger takeaway is this: modern agriculture narrowed the world's food supply down to a small handful of crops for reasons of efficiency and shelf life, not necessarily nutrition or resilience. These 15 plants are a reminder that a much wider, richer, and honestly more interesting food system has been available the entire time, most of it perfectly capable of growing in an ordinary backyard. If this video introduced you to even a few plants you never heard of, that's the whole point of making it. Subscribe if you want more of these deep dives into overlooked high-value plants, and tell me in the comments which one are you planting first. Thanks for watching.